My landlord swore the apartment above mine was empty, then gave me the keys to prove it. But when I opened the door, the footsteps suddenly stopped, and a voice whispered, "I can't find the way out." Grab a seat. This is the apartment above mine. I moved into my current apartment about 8 months ago. It's a small one-bedroom in an older building. Nothing special, but the rent was reasonable, and it was close to my work. During the showing, the landlord mentioned that the apartment directly above mine was vacant and would likely stay that way for a while due to delayed renovations. At the time, that sounded like a bonus. No upstairs neighbors, no noise. For the first few weeks, the building was exactly as quiet as I'd hoped. Then, one night, a little after 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of footsteps overhead. They weren't light or random. They were slow, heavy, and deliberate, moving back and forth across what I assumed was the living room above mine. At first, I thought someone had moved in without notice. I lay there, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. The pacing went on for close to an hour before it ended as abruptly as it had started. The next morning, I mentioned it to my landlord when I saw him in the lobby. I asked him to remind the new tenant upstairs about quiet hours. He looked genuinely confused and told me no one lived there. The renovations hadn't even begun yet. According to him, the apartment was still empty and locked. I insisted I'd heard someone walking. He said he'd check it out. Later that day, he texted me to say he'd gone upstairs. The apartment was secure, no signs of forced entry, no furniture, no footprints in the dust on the floor. He suggested it might be pipes or the building settling, the way old buildings sometimes do. I tried to accept that explanation, but it didn't sit right. Pipes don't pace. They don't move back and forth with a steady rhythm. 2 nights later, the footsteps returned. Same time, same pattern, starting around 2, continuing for almost exactly an hour. This time, I recorded it on my phone. When I played it back in the morning, the sound was clear. Slow, even footsteps crossing the floor, turning, and crossing back again. When I showed the recording to my landlord, his reaction changed. He listened carefully, replayed it twice, and didn't try to explain it away. Instead, he gave me a spare key to the apartment above mine and said that if I heard it again, I could check for myself. He looked uneasy, like the possibility of someone being up there hadn't occurred to him until now. 3 nights later, it happened again. I was lying in bed, not fully asleep, when the familiar sound began. Thud, 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 measured and unhurried. I got dressed, grabbed my phone, and went upstairs. The hallway lights were dim, most of the illumination coming from the exit signs at either end. I stopped in front of the apartment door and pressed my ear against it. The footsteps were louder here, unmistakably inside. They were moving back and forth just beyond the wall. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. The moment it opened, the sound stopped. I stepped inside and turned on the lights, calling out to see if anyone was there. No answer. The apartment was completely empty. No furniture, no boxes. The floor was coated in a thin layer of dust, undisturbed. I walked through every room slowly. Bedroom, bathroom, closets. Nothing. No footprints, no marks. It looked like no one had set foot inside for months. I stood in the living room where I'd heard the pacing. The floor felt solid. There were no loose boards, no obvious reason for any noise like that. As I stood there, I noticed a dark discoloration on the wall near the window. It was rectangular, about the size of a door. The paint there looked older, darker, as if something had soaked into it and never fully come out. As I got closer, the air felt different, cooler, thinner. I felt slightly dizzy, enough to make me stop. In the beam of my phone's flashlight, the stain seemed uneven, almost textured. For a brief moment, I had the impression of depth, as if the wall wasn't flat at all. I thought I could make out the faint outline of a door frame where no door existed. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how quiet the apartment was. I locked up and went back downstairs, leaving every light on in my own place until morning. The next day, I looked into the building's history. After some searching, I found a newspaper article from the late 1880s. A man named Richard Holt had lived in the apartment above mine. According to the article, he'd struggled with severe paranoia. Neighbors complained about constant pacing at night. He was found dead in his living room after sealing the apartment and poisoning himself with gas from the stove. In the days before his death, he'd reportedly painted a door on the wall, insisting it was the only way out. The article mentioned that the apartment had been renovated afterward, everything repainted, everything removed. The footsteps didn't stop after that. They came and went without a pattern. Some nights were quiet, others weren't. My landlord offered to let me out of the lease early, but I couldn't afford to move right away. Then, about a month ago, the sound changed. Instead of pacing in one place, the footsteps began moving through the apartment above mine, from room to room, pausing, continuing. One night, they left the apartment entirely and entered the hallway. I lay in bed, listening as they approached my door. They stopped just outside. A shadow blocked the light under the door. The handle began to turn slowly. I knew I'd locked it. I always did. The lock held, but the handle moved back and forth, testing it. Eventually, it stopped. The footsteps retreated. I started packing the next morning. I'm moving out this weekend. I'm staying with a friend until then. Last night, the footsteps came back one final time. When they stopped outside my door, I heard a voice on the other side, low, uncertain, almost apologetic. It said, "I can't find the door." I didn't answer. I don't plan to go back at night. Whatever is still moving through that apartment doesn't seem angry. It seems lost. And I don't want it deciding that my door might be the one it's been looking for. I left the building before sunrise, carrying the last of my things down the stairs instead of taking the elevator. The hallway felt narrower than it used to, the walls closer, as if the space itself had shifted slightly during the night. I didn't look up at the ceiling above my apartment. I didn't want to imagine what might be standing there listening. Later that day, my landlord texted to confirm the move-out details. He apologized again, said he planned to seal the upstairs unit until the renovations were finished, maybe longer. He didn't mention the footsteps. Neither did I. That evening, while I was at my friend's place, I realized I still had the spare key to the apartment above mine. I turned it over in my hand for a long time before setting it down on the table. I didn't want to keep it. I didn't want any reason to go back. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up without knowing why. The apartment was quiet. No footsteps, no voices, just the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own breathing. I told myself that meant it was over. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my landlord, sent a few minutes earlier. Just one line. "Did you go back upstairs tonight?" I stared at the screen until it dimmed. I didn't reply. The next morning, he called. His voice sounded strained. He said the security system in the vacant apartment had logged movement during the night, slow movement, back and forth in the living room. He said the sensors hadn't done that before. Before hanging up, he added something else. When the motion alert triggered, one of the interior microphones picked up audio, not footsteps, scraping, like a brush against a wall. He asked if I knew anything about that. I told him no. I meant it. I haven't been back to the building since. My things are gone. My name is off the mailbox. Still, sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I imagine a quiet apartment above an empty one, a darkened room, a wall that doesn't quite look right, and something standing there, tracing the outline of a door that still refuses to open. I try not to think about what happens after that, about what remains when a place is emptied out too carefully, when everything that should have left didn't quite manage to. I tell myself that old buildings make noises, that records glitch, that fear fills in gaps where there shouldn't be any. But some nights, usually around the same hour, I wake up with the same dull pressure in my chest. There's no sound, no footsteps, just the certainty that something is moving through a space I can't see anymore, following a route it learned long ago. I've caught myself listening to the walls in my friend's apartment, waiting for a familiar rhythm that never comes. Still, I keep my bedroom door locked. I keep the lights on longer than I need to. When I pass closed doors in hallways, I avoid looking at them directly, especially if the paint is uneven or the frame looks slightly off. Yesterday, while unpacking the last box, I found a fine layer of gray dust on my shoes. I don't remember stepping anywhere unfinished. I brushed it off and washed my hands, but the smell lingered for a while, faint and stale, like an old room that hasn't been opened in years. I haven't told anyone about that. I don't know if whatever was pacing above me is still there, or if it's learned to move on. I only know that some things don't disappear when you leave them behind. They wait, they listen, and when they finally find what they think is a way out, they don't always stop to check where it leads.